Pennsylvania has been a bit more of a slow build-up. They got a higher tax rate there, so it's a
really
bit more
expensive. Yeah,
bit more challenging. I think it's all in the 40% range on gross gaming revenue once you add in a few different elements to go with it.
Sounds like Australia.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, I guess there's some sympathy there for point of consumption, a few other things going on.
Yeah.
Track from Playmaster. Shear is the widest with Ruben.
All right, Samuel. Last time we spoke to Mr. Jake Williams, we harassed him in a cafe with 1,000 questions. We thought he's flying in from New Jersey. We might as well just do this on camera.
Yeah, it's good. I can't think of many of them at the moment, but but we'll fire into a few. I think
we haven't prepared almost anything, but we'll fire. So thanks for coming in, Jake.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good to see you. Why don't we start with? I asked you briefly, and I didn't get the full story. How did you start the podcast, Business of Betting?
I moved around a lot. After I finished university here, I went from Melbourne to San Francisco to Dallas to New York to the Cayman Islands to Munich, back to New Jersey. And throughout some of those travel experiences and living in different cities, I still wanted to follow Australian racing. That was my sort of first passion when it came to betting and sports, and then obviously all the different sports that I follow around the world now. And the hardest thing was finding good content in not only Australian racing, but a lot of the stuff. And I used to complain about it a little bit, and in different countries, it was harder to find different things. I couldn't just get access to a lot of the different content that was available, even like geo blocking and stuff like that.
Right.
You'd be surprised how much stuff gets locked out. And then I one day decided I'd try it myself, maybe see how that went. I figured it would take 2 or 3 weeks and then it'd be done. And then it got to week 3, 4, 5, 6, and I think we're at about 111 or 112 now. So I think it's the one crazy thing is about 112 episodes in about 120 weeks or something like that. A few weeks off here and there to get married and a few other less important things than a weekly podcast. But so here we are.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
How'd the marriage go? Good?
All good, yeah. No, she's happy enough now, so that's good. We're in year 1. I think we're about 4 or 5 months in, so no massive complaints yet.
Beautiful. Well done. What do you look forward to doing when you come back to Melbourne for a week?
Honestly, usually this time of year. So Cox Plate, Derby Day, those type of things. I follow from afar horse racing relatively closely or as closely as I can. And then depending on the time of year, sometimes get to a final in the footy. Follow the Blues and a few other teams. There's not a lot of finals games to go to, but try and sneak to 1 or 2 if I can. But outside of that, I kind of pretend I'm a tourist. I go to my favorite restaurants, coffee shops, stay out of trouble, take it easy. So nothing too spectacular here.
Yeah, beautiful. And the sun's come out, which is rare for Melbourne.
Yeah.
Timed you on perfectly, which is probably consistent with timing the podcast explosion, timing the US sports betting. Your timing's immaculate.
I would say I'm on the positive side of some good variance at the moment. The fact that I live in Jersey, where that's kind of the new heart of sports betting in America. Obviously, Nevada was sort of the king for a while, but I think Jersey's probably officially taking over now.
Yeah.
It's just pot luck, I guess, or happenstance. But it's been an interesting few different cities with Jersey being where I live now and being the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So it's a good place to be if you like sports betting, if you're interested in a new dynamic market, and it's kind of only getting started.
Yeah.
So your office in the city in Manhattan, though?
Yeah. So I go to Manhattan every day, or when I'm in the office, and then live in Hoboken in Jersey, which is now becoming more, I wouldn't say famous in sports betting, but FanDuel, which is owned by Flutter, is there. Or they're in Jersey City, Hoboken area. You got FanDuel, you got DraftKings, who most people would have heard of in previously daily fantasy sports, now sports betting. I think between Bet365, there's probably 4 or 5 others that are in and around that area. So
are they there now? 365?
365 in Cherry Hill, I believe.
Yeah,
which is not too far away.
I think that's where the Fox betting
Yeah,
one's going to
Fox
set
there.
up.
I think
Cherry
Stars Group, they might be in Jersey City as well. There's a few of them. So they're all, obviously with Jersey being a bit of a hub, and with some of the technology you have to get tested and things like that, it's good to be close to the regulator, and some of the requirements on regulations need to be in state. So certain things have to be within the state where the sports betting happens. So it is a bit of a hub at the moment, and there's a lot of other companies who are looking at the New York/US market, whether it's Jersey sports betting, whether it's tech, whether it's B2B suppliers, whether it's even just fantasy businesses. Typically it would be Manhattan. Well, that's probably too expensive. Let's look at Brooklyn. Yeah. Instead of going that direction, now a lot of them are looking at Hoboken, Jersey City, because of the betting component to it all.
Yeah, wow. And are you just seeing a flurry of activity and new operators popping in? Like, I watch it from afar, but
very, very much so. So rewinding, for those who don't know, May 14th last year, Supreme Court struck down the federal law PASPA, which you've probably heard of. People call it PAPSPA and a number of other things. But that was May last year. And since then, we've seen, I think we've got 17 operators in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
For those who follow the Australian market closely, New Jersey is obviously smaller than Australia. I think there's about 9 million people in Jersey. What do we got, 25-ish here?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 17 operators is obviously not tenable long term, but they're all making their, I guess, start in New Jersey, hoping to take market share. And what we've seen, certainly in the first 12 to 18 months, is DraftKings and FanDuel pretty much taking over.
Yeah.
So Paddy Power Betfair, or Flutter now, bought FanDuel a while ago. They bought another company called Draft, a daily fantasy company, and then together they've sort of taken over certainly the US market to this point. DraftKings, I think between DraftKings and FanDuel, around 70-80% market share in Jersey, and a lot of other states is pretty similar. So that's sort of been the trend line to start with. Places like Indiana went live pretty recently. Pennsylvania has been a bit more of a slow build up. They got a higher tax rate there, so it's a
really
bit more
expensive. Yeah.
bit more challenging. I think it's all in all in the 40% range on gross gaming revenue once you add in a few different elements to go with it.
Sounds like Australia.
It's tough. It's tough, yeah. I guess there's some sympathy there for point of consumption, a few other things going on. And then like a state lottery. So Oregon has their own app, which they do through a B2B supplier. They offer sports betting in the state of Oregon. And then you've got somewhere like New Hampshire. They're looking at ways that they're going to do it. DC has been pretty hot in the press with some of the ways they went about picking their sports betting partner, which you can Google those stories and read them for as long as you want to go down that rabbit hole. But I guess the one key theme is Jersey's doing it in a similar way to we know it here in Australia with different options, different apps, websites, plenty of different markets, betting on whatever you please. Other states are taking their own approach, so it's not necessarily that easy. One thing we've seen is a trend towards states wanting people to sign up in person. So that would be the equivalent of having to go to the Crown Casino to sign up at Crown, open your account, deposit there, and then you can bet. And when you think
how would
about,
they do that? Like a store of some sort?
Basically.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense for anyone that knows anything about sports betting. But the casinos or the property owners themselves want people still to come to their property. So if you have a casino and people are playing blackjack and roulette and they're playing slot machines, they're playing craps or whatever, they want people to still come and do that. So they think the best way to capitalize on sports betting is make people come to the property.
Yes. The racetracks would be doing pretty keen to do that type of stuff.
Well, you can imagine some of the racetracks, no one goes there anymore. You don't need to. So they're like, all right, well, let's bring everyone to the racetrack.
It seems very short term and everything's mobile, right? And everything's online as possible. So how are these sort of power brokers even able to have that influence that like these archaic stuff is like you have to come to a casino or we can only give so many licenses to so many places. Like how are they actually able to have that influence to start with? And is it inevitable for it to just be sort of,
So the first question, it's just state politics in America is a whole different beast.
Right.
And you think about it, in a lot of these states, the biggest stakeholders and the biggest taxpayers are casinos. They hire hundreds of employees. They generate a lot of money, obviously. They print money, some of them. So they're paying a lot of tax back to the state. So when they want to have influence with their state politicians, they listen compared to a foreign sports betting operator who comes in and says, here's the best way to do it. We're going to make you more money. We're going to make you happier. The state's going to have more funding to do other things. And they don't necessarily listen to the out-of-country, out-of-state business as opposed to the local casino who says, no, I want to bring people to my property. Here's the best way to do sports betting. They're kind of, it doesn't make any sense even from that perspective because the best way to bring people is to get them on mobile devices, betting on the app that's linked to their property. And then what we've seen anyway now is just cross-selling. So cross-selling their online casino, cross-selling, hey, you're betting at an MGM app. If we want you to come to an MGM property, instead of making you drive there to sign up, which no one's going to do, if I told you to sign up to Facebook or Twitter, you had to drive to Ballarat to do it, you wouldn't do it. Like there's no. Sometimes it's like going up to Albury or something. You wouldn't drive that far to sign up to Twitter. Some people might, but for the most part, you're not going to do it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, so because of that patchwork, we're seeing a lot of different types of regulation, types of legislation being passed. And somewhere like Mississippi only has retail offerings. There's no online. And that was, again, a political thing. And I think they're not kicking themselves because they kind of knew it by the end that it was a bad idea to do it that way if they wanted to generate the revenues they were hoping for. And I think they'll probably change their policy soon at some point anyway, and they'll have more broad mobile sports betting. I think every state will eventually get to that point, and then you'll have some states like Utah, which won't have any type of gambling. It doesn't seem like Hawaii and a few other places traditionally haven't had any type of wagering or even casino games. They may not do it. And then there's a bunch of other states that have their own issues, whether it's down in Florida with some tribal gaming issues. Card rooms in California and statutory problems might need a constitutional amendment there. And a place like Colorado where it passed, but in order to pass the new tax, they have to give the voters essentially a ballot question, and if the voters pass that, then it can be implemented. I think it's actually coming up in a couple of weeks, so that'll be interesting. And the way it's written, the ballot question is very not positive for the sports betting industry. Basically, it sounds like we're going to be taxing anyway. Those
John
people
Howard
that want to go
wrote
and read it, those people who want to go and read it, you'll see what I mean. But the good thing with sports betting in Colorado is that some of the taxation will go towards funding for, I think it's clean water projects or something like that. So there's a chance that'll get through, and I think some of the operators will have a broad campaign in the next few weeks to get people aware of, hey, we're going to tax operators, not people. You're going to have sports betting in your state, and it's going to go to certain projects, which should be beneficial for the state of Colorado. So it's a weird, wild world. It really is 50. I mean, people say 50 states under one flag and currency, and it really is like that, and it's 50 countries as far as anyone else is concerned.
Yeah,
a lot of expats, UK here, Ireland, heading to US at the moment.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. Even I live in Hoboken, as I mentioned a few of the
Aussie accents.
Plenty of Aussies and Irish around there. Obviously, FanDuel being there.
Yep.
I was in Las Vegas last week for G2E, the big expo, talking to some of their folks, and they're trying to bring some of even the sports bet folks coming over to the US, trying to rebuild or build from scratch something like FanDuel. So I think there'll be more and more of that. It's not that easy to get into the US if you're not an Aussie.
This would be pretty complicated.
Some of the European countries, it's not as easy as the Aussies with the E3 and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a challenge because it's sometimes hard to say I need a sports betting trader when the US governmental authority can say, well, there's plenty of them in America, go and hire the American ones.
Yep.
So there's going to be some challenges with that. It's going to be a scarce market in some regards for certain skill sets, because how trading works at Sportsbet in Melbourne versus how trading might work in the US in some states is very different and far more advanced, purely because it's been around longer. They've been doing it longer. They know the environment. They know how racing, greyhounds, harness, and sports work. So they're going to be better equipped, I would imagine, to do it. But there's going to be a lot more people over there, and I think that's generally a good thing. There is we're America, we're going to do things how we want to do it, which is, I think it's a good thing as well, because a fresh set of eyes never hurts. And there's plenty of jurisdictions around the world that do things very well, and there's always things to learn though in a fresh set of eyes, whether it's a media company, a broadcast company, a tech company, a daily fantasy company saying, but is there a better way we can do what is already being done? And I think that's positive.
Yeah. It can go so many different ways, but you're touching on sort of how the sports traders analyze the bets that come in, which I'm sure is an evolutionary process, but obviously with those big UK operators, I imagine that people are getting bets referred and closed and the usual techniques. Is that pretty prevalent there? Yeah,
so it was interesting. So May 14th was when the Supreme Court struck down PASPA. From there, there's kind of been these ebbs and flows of different issues coming up. Affiliates is always one comes up because it's very widespread, and everyone looks at the numbers immediately and says, whoa, is that how it works? Okay, this is going to be better than typical affiliate numbers. And so that's the first one. And one of the main ones, certainly in the professional or more savvy communities, is accounts and restrictions and things like that. And you've got companies coming from all over the world that have experience in risk management, let's call it, and
IP management.
Yeah, and looking at certain accounts and pretty quickly these days, figuring out if they think they're going to be profitable or what type of hold percentage they're going to be able to have on them, and then acting accordingly. So that's nothing new for people who've been in the industry a while or been in different jurisdictions.
Well, I think that might be something just different because it did take a while for that to happen here, whereas that's already there. So
day one,
they're going to be doing that.
And no protections in place or anyone looking after punters?
No, so I think the only thing that I've noticed different was, I guess the PELP stuff comes up a lot as well. And Americans are just like, that's not fair. That doesn't make any sense. There was an example of William Hill recently where I think some guy had a correlated parlay that hit that was lasted months, and then at the end they said, actually, you know what, that's palpable error. We can't pay you out, and then everyone was like, this doesn't make any sense. What if it was in reverse? All those types of things. So it's, there are some things like that. And I saw an example where I think it was a field goal late in the Denver game where I think it was supposed to be $1.60 chance or something like that, and it was 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 or something crazy. And there was some complaints. They offered the guy who placed a few bets live, I think it was at a racetrack or at the casino.
Yeah.
I think sweet tickets to a New York Giants football game or something like that. He said, no, I want my money. And I think they paid it out more from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, right. Bad PR.
Yeah, so there's some things like that going on. And it's going to be interesting. I think one of the main or the most interesting part is in Jersey, I think there's about 17 sports books, which is 17 potential accounts for those who are betting.
Smells like a few free bets too.
There's plenty of that going on, yeah. Some of the when I was at a Betfair event a while back, I was talking to some of the guys there who do a lot of the promo arbing and things like that. And I didn't, to be honest, back then know a lot about it. I've looked into it a little bit since, and it's fascinating. When I told them what, I've got friends who live in Jersey, and some of them have some free time. Some of them used to be poker players and things like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we looked into it. It didn't. Is there something we're missing? Because it seems like free money, and there's 17 sports books. And I think one of the promos Bet America did was, I think you bet on a team to win the Super Bowl, and for every regular season win, I think you get up to $100 free bet in your account if they win. So if you took the Patriots, I think they're still playing the Jets right now, but I think they're about to be 7-0. You'd have $700 in free bets.
Wow.
And if you, I think there was a max, it might have been $2,000 or $2.5 max, and I think they were 6 or 7-1 at the start of the year to win the Super Bowl. The Patriots, I think some people took the Chiefs as well, but if you do the math on some of those things, it gets relatively good relatively quickly.
Wow.
But I think back to what you were talking about before, once you start acting accordingly and doing the math and figuring it out, they're not going to welcome you with open arms necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have thought so. That would have been something that would have been picked up from here in the UK pretty quick, I would have thought. Put straight in. If you see a player in the future, one of the main ones, who would you say will take most of the market there? I suppose now with the merger,
that'd be pretty short,
them.
I would have thought.
Well, it was interesting. I was talking about this last week as well in Vegas, and back when it sort of started in May, June, let's say, I think personally anyway, the consensus of the people I was talking to was the MGMs of the world, Caesars, and those type of big casino names, those brands that everyone generally knows, were going to take over. And obviously GBC partnered up with MGM to do their Raw. I think it was a joint venture, and they were finalizing their tech, getting ready for Jersey. I think they were live, but their marketing spend hadn't really started until this NFL season started, and everyone sort of expected, well, that will be what happens. Everyone knows MGM and Caesars, but what's actually happened is the daily fantasy businesses, which makes sense now when you think about it, but at that time it wasn't abundantly clear that FanDuel and DraftKings would streak away with an early lead, let's say. So, and now that it's Paddy Power, Betfair, Flutter, plus Stars Group, which is obviously Fox Bet, which is big, and they have market access. So I think right now,
they were Poker Stars as well?
Yes. Yep. So about 33% of Americans have access to legal sports betting at the moment.
Yep.
And then you think about the next 66, a lot of that is places like California, Texas, Florida, a lot of people in those states. But as we get closer towards 60, 70, 80% of the US with legalized sports betting, Penn National's a big name. They have a lot of territories where they have existing properties, for example, where if legalized and if it follows the same trend where casinos, racetracks, existing gaming operators get preferential treatment to have sports betting tethered to their businesses and their licenses, then they'll be one to watch. But they've already mentioned their partnerships with, I think Canby's been a big winner there. I think even PointsBet, who obviously the Aussies might know about based on their Aussie operations, they got 1 or 2 different state access deals, and I think William Hill, Caesars and Eldorado are merging at the moment. So that's puts a bit of a spanner in the works, but there's so many crossovers and there's so many interesting elements. Even William Hill, which obviously people here would know about, their existing previous operations in the Aussie market. They've been pretty popular and strong in the US market for a while. More on the retail side, I think they're partnering with the Delaware Lottery, top of my head, to do their app, or they might be doing their app, but they're certainly doing their land-based retail operational sports betting as well. So, but I would say, Flutter plus the Stars Group, pretty ominous. And then those from the UK will know about how popular Sky Bet has become and the success there. And they're trying to do something similar, it seems, with Fox Bet.
Yeah.
Cowherd and all these guys are putting out
I was
there.
wondering, like, they're pretty good at peddling stuff, Fox. I would have thought that they'll push on this.
Well, and Fox Properties, you know, the baseball was on the other night.
Yeah.
A lot of people were probably watching the Yankees when they lost, but they got NFL. They got a lot of big names. You know, Buck and Aikman are probably the two most well known. Obviously, Romo and CBS is doing a pretty good job now, but they have a lot of existing properties, crossover. They have existing access to sports leagues where they can use, you know, different IP, whether it's logos, whether it's special promos, things like that. Once US sports leagues become a lot more involved in sports betting across many states, then you're going to have a lot more, I guess, interesting overlap between typical US media, typical sports betting, and then that convergence is where, you know, Fox Bet with the Sky Bet similarities, and then obviously with the vast experience of Flutter and their success even here with sports bet. I guess I lean towards them in most things because I know some of the guys there and how sharp they are, and they obviously have TVG and a few other properties as well, where if you throw all that together, obviously a lot of consolidations happened and is happening and will continue to happen. And somewhere like New Jersey, I don't think anyone I talk to thinks you can have 17 sports betting operators. You can see the public numbers where the long tail, a lot of the operators on that list have less than 2 or 3% market share. And if you think about, if you've got 1% market share in Jersey and a lot of sharps are trying to get access to certain accounts and bet into those places, then you're either going to have a lot of sharp money, and that's going to be the vast majority of your volume, or you turn them away and then you've got a very short list of clients and a very small volume, and then you have to justify the marketing spend and some of those things that we've, you know, become accustomed to in this industry.
Has offshore taken a hit?
To be honest, I have no idea. I would imagine they have.
Numbers,
I know some of them have shut off certain states because certainly in New Jersey, the DGE, the regulator who also has enforcement power, they've released some warnings and those types of things for not necessarily those sports books, but anyone working with them. So, you know, they every now and then will release something saying this company, you have to cease and desist working or promoting offshore gambling in the state of New Jersey. So we've seen some of that. It's just hard. I think the one thing I've learned talking to especially younger people in the US, when they go through university, they're under 21. They're not going out to bars necessarily drinking, or certainly not legally. And their bookie experience is someone on campus, some other student or someone else is a bookie. And it's all credit. So you just say, all right, Sammy, these 4 games, can I have 50 on each of them? And I'll talk to you on Monday. And I'll talk to you on Monday and we'll settle up. Either you pay me or I pay you. Probably more than likely, if you're a kid in university, you probably don't know what you're doing necessarily. You might hit a few parlays every now and then or some multis, but you're not going to be making money from the bookie. So that experience then translates over to there are options where you can have credit bookies. And not that everyone's going crazy with the credit bookies and reaching their limit, but they're not used to signing up for an account, giving their social security number away, depositing money, getting that blocked because the payment processing in the US is still, I think it's less than 50% are going through it, even at this stage.
Oh, wow.
So that's a massive hurdle and challenge. And even like Chase, which is a huge bank, JP Morgan Chase, I think their credit card transactions aren't working necessarily in a lot of the apps. So there's certain ways where it works and others where it doesn't. It's not a great experience, especially coming from other markets where I remember here, when I used to live here, putting money in those betting accounts was pretty easy. US, not easy. And you know, sometimes you can try PayPal and it'll work, and then other times it won't. Some sports betting operators it'll work, some won't. There's like other stuff on there. Most people haven't heard of Skrill and some of these other ones that people in the industry might have heard of. So it's not a seamless experience. And so, I mean, we've talked about some of the hurdles. It's patchwork state by state, but even with all that, places like New Jersey are humming along by now. Probably, what is it? At least a year or over a year of pretty smooth operations without too many hiccups. And so I think as that continues to evolve, it's going to be even more interesting if that's even possible. I think over the last 12 months, there's been a lot going on, a lot of different states. And people ask about marijuana. I think in terms of trajectory and timing, sports betting's clearly outpacing something like marijuana. So as we get to, I think we're at about 20 states that have passed law. I think about 13 are live. There's a few more that are going to come online soon. And we're talking about states like Illinois, which is bigger than New Jersey. Pennsylvania, if they get things more settled and sorted out, they could be bigger than New Jersey. So it is pretty daunting to think about some of these bigger states getting it right, if they get it right, what sports betting could be like in even 3 to 5 years' time. We're talking about an enormous industry, even though it's a low-margin product compared to other casino products, like slot machines and other table games. But it certainly has a pretty strong place in the overall gaming industry. And the other thing we haven't talked about, which is probably the sleeping giant, is tribal gaming. I think right now in the US, tribal gaming makes up around 50% of overall gaming, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
And right now, barely any tribal sports betting operations happen. There's some minor sports betting going on in New Mexico. Probably not a state high on everyone's list, but
Breaking Bad action.
Yeah, so exactly. So I think it might even be Albuquerque or one of those places where they have, based on their current compact, some sports betting going on. I think it's retail or very limited mobile offerings. But once tribal gaming becomes a more prominent aspect in places like Oklahoma, Minnesota, Florida, there's tribal gaming, Washington State, I think even California, those types of places, then it's going to be really interesting. And it's obviously trained as a lawyer, but looking at some of the legal issues that come with that may not be interesting for others, but there'll be some interesting things to play out on the legal side, and just how that unfolds and evolves over the next. That'll probably take a lot longer. Traditionally, tribal gaming does, but there's plenty more to come in the US market.
Yeah, it's massive. Wow. Yeah, so many questions. There's no exchange at the moment, as far as I can tell. Paddy Power, Betfair, obviously Flutter now. To my eye, just looking from over here, and we're owned by Crown independently, it seems like they're putting all their eggs in the FanDuel basket and their newer properties, and that sort of more sophisticated product probably needs a more mature market. Do you think that is it a case of it needs to be state by state, so the liquidity's a pain and it's operating independently and it makes it unattractive from that perspective, or is it because the platform itself is a little bit intimidating?
I think it's both. I think the Wire Act and the first point is most pertinent right now. Just thinking about pooling liquidity, there's certain discussions, very limited discussions going on about that. I think if you got Pennsylvania, Jersey, West Virginia, and a couple other states in a room and said, hey, we need an answer by the end of the day, somehow in a miraculous world, it may be possible, but the Wire Act just impedes so much, which basically is a federal law from the mob days, which says that you can't pass information across state lines related to gambling.
Right.
So what used to happen anyway was there would be a price disseminated from somewhere on horse racing, and all the mob people would run to the telephones and call Pittsburgh, Philly, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Jersey, everywhere else to spread all the lines on the sports and horse racing and things like that. And they wanted to stop that. They wanted to make that illegal. So this is back in the days when everything was done on probably telephones at a public telephone booth, like a lot of the mob movies. And that's still in place now. It doesn't make a lot of sense for 2019. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for 2001, to be honest. And it's very vague. It basically says something like any information transferred in the business of betting is basically a prohibition. So that could be ESPN talking about the spread of the Super Bowl if you want to look at it incredibly technically. There is an exemption for information transferred across two states where gambling is legal. How strong that is or how compelling that is for a state sports betting operation to rely on something like that, yet to be determined, probably not strong enough. But I think at some point, I think because they do it already with things like poker. There's some precedent. Horse racing has got incredibly lucky. The Interstate Horse Racing Act in the US allows that type of thing for other reasons, which, I'm trying to get into the history of betting in the US, and there's some interesting stories that go with that, but that's for another day. But the way sports betting is probably going to work is everyone's going to want to pool liquidity. Getting to that point, how it gets done, how it gets approved. Does the Department of Justice need to have a say or be involved, or would they get involved if something happened anyway? There's going to be tribal elements that come in when talking about tribal land versus non-tribal land in the US and how that type of thing works, which is a different issue, but along the same lines of getting liquidity together. That's going to be...
Sounds like chaos.
Yeah, it really is. But there are some, I know some startups in the exchange type world who are around and looking to launch. And the main
like
question...
a crypto product or something like
that?
No,
even real money, normal. So similar to what everyone would expect with a Betfair product. Betfair is live in New Jersey with the exchange for racing. But on the sports side, there's nothing yet. I think it's
been there a while for the racing.
Yeah. And I don't know how successful it's going, to be honest. That's not a negative comment. I just really don't know. But I think there'll be businesses that start to try and do the peer-to-peer model. And then to your second point, just getting the regular person involved in understanding how it works, why it works, what are the levers and those type of things. And just, and I think a lot of the professional type people would be interested. but do they want to be first to charge out there and put their positions on an exchange?
Yeah, mate. So it seems all those UK operators that are coming into the market and using the formula that's worked in Europe and Australia, particularly with Flutter, to me seems to be the odds-on favourite to sort of take over state by state. It seems right for some US entrepreneurialism and just a completely different perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be the interesting part with the US market as it evolves. You're going to have people looking at sports betting, and it shouldn't be confused. Americans and sports betting is very much intertwined.
Right.
It's been happening forever. The point spread in NFL is what created sports betting, essentially, in my mind anyway, just the way it works today. The NFL product, football, college, or NFL is perfect. The amount of scoring is not too little like soccer, where goals don't happen that often. And it's not too much like a basketball game where you're in the hundreds pretty quick. It's right in that sweet spot, and pretty much every game the team's within a even if they're 7-point underdogs and they're down 14 or even 15 now, they're one score away from covering. So it's a perfect sports betting option. And I think that, coupled with the fact that a lot of these interesting companies and smart people are looking at it and saying, okay, we know that's how it's been done before. We know Flutter and we know Sportsbet and we know all these businesses want to do it this way, which is fine and great. And 365 is one of the biggest and best companies in the world and make plenty of money.
Yes.
But they want to do it a little bit differently and they want to have their own approach. So I think there's going to be a space for a little bit of disruption, depending on how successful that could be, will be how the US market evolves. And if they can get a sustainable product that can go across these patchwork of states, then I think there's a gap there where people in Chicago, people down in Wall Street in Manhattan will be looking at it and saying, all right, well, we're used to investing in options or derivatives or equities or hedge funds or ETFs now, whatever they're doing. We want to apply certain principles like that to sports betting and get access to the entire B2C US market. There's an interesting concept, idea, and approach there. How they pull that off is obviously much more difficult. There's a lot that goes into it, but there's certainly a place there, and I think it's going to be one to watch in the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah,
right. So that's the timeline. You think like Illinois knocking over in a few more states, and then as sports betting penetrates more states and the market matures, that's when these opportunities will pop up more. Maybe the legislation will relax a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if there's a place you want to watch, it's Jersey. I think there's 33 skins available, and we're at about 17 now. So you can get access there. And I think you can probably talk to the regulator and say, hey, they're very smart people at the New Jersey regulator. They understand wagering, online wagering, more than anyone else in the US because they've been doing it for longer. And they've had a bit of a head start with sports betting. Even they're surpassing Nevada, who's been pretty slow to have things like being able to sign up on your phone from your house rather than going to a casino and things like that. Casino and sports betting operations in Nevada hasn't been mobile in-play focused as much as other parts of the world, and what we see in Jersey now, obviously with the FanDuels and Flutter coming in and 365 coming in and all these different companies. So I think if you keep an eye on New Jersey and those new businesses that are popping up, they'll start there and they'll give it a go. And if they are relatively successful, they'll try other places, whether it is Illinois, whether it is other states that come online, whether it's Pennsylvania one day, if they can navigate a 40+% tax, and they can be treated in a little bit different of a manner. There's another thing called the federal excise tax, which is 0.25% of turnover, which goes to the federal government, which is not good if we're talking about a more peer-to-peer model. So trying to figure out those issues are not going to be that simple. But I think, hungry young companies looking for success in this space, there's certainly a path there for them, and they hopefully will have some, disruptive effect to the status quo, especially if you're talking about the more savvy professional people that I'm sure we see here at Betfair, and we see different parts of the world based on what's allowed and what's possible. So hopefully, in the coming years, we see these businesses having a crack at it.
All right, mate, we're running out of data here. We're chewing through the SD cards because we're chewing you for information. We'll continue this off the field, I think. Thanks so much for coming in, mate. Really appreciate seeing you.
It's great, mate.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be in the HQ. Hopefully get a tour, get some merch, talk to the crew here.
Anyone big coming up on the podcast?
I can't say, Sammy.
Oh, okay.
No, it'll keep churning out week to week. So if you want anyone, let me know, and I'll keep trying to ask some decent questions.
Beautiful.
Fantastic, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.